It started with a sound so out of place in the quiet Alaskan wilderness that it made retired wildlife biologist Thomas Raines freeze mid-step, a deep guttural moan, drawn out and trembling with such aching sorrow that it echoed through the snow-laced pines like a ghost in mourning. And when he turned, hand instinctively going to the tranquilizer rifle slung across his shoulder, what he saw should have sent any rational man running. A massive grizzly bear, matted fur crusted with old blood and fresh snow, lumbering not in attack but in grief, her colossal body dragging forward a smaller bundle. Her cub, limp and twitching, blood smeared across its side like paint on a ruined canvas. Yet something in the way she moved, in the haunted desperation in her eyes, held Thomas rooted, because she wasn't attacking, wasn't roaring or posturing or charging as any protective mother should have done when faced with a man, but rather she was crying audibly, a sound he had never before heard from a bear, not in 32 years of studying them, a wet, guttural sob as if her massive lungs could no longer hold the heartbreak, and Thomas, instead of backing away, dropped to his knees in disbelief as the bear nudged her dying cub closer, closer still, until the young bear lay only feet from where he knelt, shivering and gasping for air in the crimson-dappled snow, and in that impossible moment, man and bear meeting not in fear or violence, but in mutual desperation, Thomas understood. She was begging, not with words, but with posture, body language, and unthinkable trust, because somehow this wild creature had seen in him not a threat, but a sliver of hope. And though he knew the cub was likely mortally wounded, that even if by some miracle it survived the next few minutes, the chances of long-term recovery were almost nil, he also knew he couldn't just stand by. So with painstaking slowness, he removed his gloves, unzipped his emergency medical pack, and began working, talking softly the whole time, not to calm the bear, but because it helped still his trembling hands as he injected a mild tranquilizer into the cub to dull its pain, cleaned the gaping wound on its abdomen, and stitched it closed with hands that had once operated on eagles, foxes, even a lynx, but never a grizzly. Certainly not while its mother sat 5 feet away, watching every twitch of his fingers with liquid, intelligent eyes. And the hours slipped by in that silent grove like pages turning in a sacred book, until finally the sun dipped low and he sat back on his heels, exhausted, unsure whether the cub would make it through the night. But what happened next shattered every barrier he believed existed between man and beast. The mother bear let out a low huff, then with excruciating gentleness picked up her cub by the scruff, turned, and walked away. Not quickly, not frantically, but slowly, deliberately, pausing once to look back over her massive shoulder at the man still kneeling in blood-stained snow. And in her eyes was something Thomas could only describe as gratitude, so palpable and fierce it knocked the breath from his lungs. He thought that would be the end of it, that he'd witnessed a once-in-a-lifetime event, a secret exchange never meant to be seen, much less repeated. But 3 weeks later, just as spring began melting the ice from the valley floor, Thomas spotted movement near his cabin and froze as the mother bear returned, healthy and strong, with her cub alive, healed, bounding beside her with a playful energy that made Thomas laugh aloud. But more astonishing still, she approached again, closer this time, until he could see the light reflecting in her eyes. And then she did something that defied logic, science, and everything he knew. She sat down, facing him, and nudged her cub forward as if offering it to him, not in surrender, but in introduction, as though saying, "This is my child, and you are now part of our story." And over the following months, The bears returned again and again, not daily, not on any predictable schedule, but often enough that Thomas began leaving food out, sitting nearby with a book or a cup of coffee while the cub played in the clearing and the mother bear watched with a calm intensity that made him feel bizarrely safe until word spread of the bear whisperer of Wind River, and journalists, scientists, and skeptics descended with cameras and questions, but Thomas refused to let them in. This wasn't a story for headlines or science journals, he insisted, because what he'd witnessed was sacred, something older than language or understanding, a bridge between species built not of data, but of empathy. And over time, most people stopped trying to find them, the world moving on as it always does, leaving Thomas in peace with his bears. Yet the tale lived on, whispered around campfires and in ranger stations, growing with each retelling. But none could ever capture the raw truth of that first encounter. A mother grizzly, broken,